In the military, the focus is the mission. Once the mission is over and you're transitioning into civilian life, you are in shock. Because there's so much trauma that happened. And you stuck it away.
Hello! My anxiety level is high.
Okay.
Did it happen 8 years ago or way before then?
Way before.
Okay.
In the 90s. So yeah, it's been a while. My husband's gonna ask, how'd it go? I'm still hiding or not telling everything.
It's a grinder. The VA is just a bureaucratic mess.
But you don't know what I reported. You don't know what I said.
No, right.
It wasn't a coincidence that you called me. It happened. And I know I need to deal with it this time.
All of us in this room, we all have our stories. A victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, depression does not define who I am.
I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here.
Wow, body building. How was that? I did it for 15 years. Oh my gosh. This is what kept me sane.
Are you doing another show?
November 11th? Yeah.
Show.
Show.
It's going down.
It's going down. Oh, God, that's gorgeous.
But that is what I am.
Welcome. How's your day going so far? You guys doing all right?
Just getting started.
There we go. Exactly. Well, congratulations on such a beautiful and heartwarming documentary. I think it's so informative and so important at this time, of course. I want to start with you, Brittany, of course. You've done some films in the women's rights sphere before. What was it about this message that, connected with you?
I'm really interested in issues of empowerment. And as things are changing, women have more roles available to them, more opportunities available to them. How are women making choices? And how are they empowered in those choices? And I was really interested in women veterans because they are put in situations that a lot of women don't find themselves in. They're really a special group, and so this film gave me the opportunity to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as American citizens, I think everybody's been touched by war in some way, whether it's a grandfather or a father that's been into the service. I mean, have you been connected yourself? Do you have friends who have gone? Was it something about hearing their stories that also informed this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my father, my uncle, both my grandfathers, they're all military, all Army. I grew up partially in an Air Force town. My best friend was in the Marines, one of the first people into Iraq after September 11th. I'm sorry, Afghanistan after September 11th. So I do have peripheral connections to the military. I myself have no experience with the military, so it's been really interesting to talk to these ladies about their experiences. But I'm also interested in, the military is like life times 1,000. Like everything that could happen to you in life can happen to you in a really short amount of time in the military. And so it's inevitable that we come out of those experiences having had some traumatic experiences among many other experiences. And so that's one thing that drew me to the story as well is how do people move on after they've experienced traumatic events?
Yeah, and you guys open up so much in this film. I mean, it's really impressive and very brave of you guys. I mean, what was it about Brittany as a filmmaker that made you comfortable to hit that level? I guess we'll start with you, Valerie, and then maybe go left, yeah.
It definitely came to watching her as far as the compassion and the trust. It was over a series of time before that trust started to develop. I particularly like to stay behind the scenes and watch as people interact with others. And so I was able to have a little bit of one-on-one time with her as well. And just, I fell in love with her as far as her compassion towards how she was handling the project. So she allowed me to ask any questions. And so we just went back and forth with dialogue. And once again, the trust was built up. And I said, okay, I'm all in and I'm ready to do this. And I will be vulnerable. And I, do what you want with what I share, so.
Yeah. Roberta?
Well, initially, our foundation, they were going to use Grace After Fire as just a platform or foundation to bring women around the table, as we do. But working with Brittany and just seeing as Val stated, compassion and empathy towards the women and just wanting to know more and basically representing them is what drew me to Brittany. Just that sincere empathy is what really impacted me to go forward.
Yeah. And you, Laly?
And for me, it was definitely her interest in my advocacy towards working with veteran treatment courts. At the time, I was lobbying for a veteran treatment court in one of the smaller counties in Texas, gathering statistical data, demographics, and presenting that back to elected officials. And it was a sincere wanting to understand what these veteran treatment courts and how they were impacting our veterans, our community as well, and helping them move forward with their lives. So that's what really, I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm sorry. That's what really allowed me to openly share some of those things with Brittany throughout the entire time while she was filming is her passion and dedication on wanting to highlight some of the demographic that was being forgotten after the wars, coming home, suffering, and now their society's problem. How do we move forward and help them now move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And, for you, Brittany, I mean, usually when a director is going to take a project on, like a documentary or even a feature, they do some research into what's been done about that before. I mean, this is one of those rare cases where, women in the military have absolutely been an underserved narrative. So, there's not that much, I'm sure, to look at. So what was your, goal with the film? And were you watching any other documentaries? What informed the way that this was created?
Well, there have been some films made about women veterans, not many, as you point out. The most prominent example is not about women veterans, it's about women in the military, called The Invisible War, and it's about military sexual trauma and the reporting process within the military. But it's an advocacy film, it's about changing legislation, it's interview-based. It's a very important film, it's made a lot of change. This film sort of picks up where that film leaves off, because now we're looking at the effect of these kinds of traumas many years later on the lived experience of actual women over a period of time. And so I think that's something that we forget about in this national conversation we're finally having about sexual assault, is that, there's the point where it happens, there's the point somewhere along the road where maybe you want to talk about it, but what effect does it have on you in the interim? What effect does it have on you afterwards? How do you live your life? How do you have a relationship with your husband? How do you have a relationship with your family? How do you think about this at work? There's just a lot of things that people don't think about the repercussions that this has on actual lives. So that's what I really hope people can take away from this film.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking to that, what did you know that you had to get beyond just the one-on-one interviews? What else did you have to paint as far as a picture to make sure people understood people on a greater level than just them speaking to them, at a lens?
Yeah, these women were probably frustrated with me always asking, well, what else can we film? What else can we film? Because I didn't want to do interviews. I wanted to see what their lives were like. And so I was constantly asking them questions about, well, when are you going to see your family? When are you and Kevin going to be doing something that I can film? And I would just be trying to find out, on what stage is this story going to play out? And one of the things that I think is really important for documentaries is people's faces. You see in the film, and you probably see it in the trailer, but in the film itself, their faces say way more than their words do. And that's something that I think, you can't fake that. And you have to be in a moment where, these all three of them were amazingly comfortable in front of the camera. And what you're seeing is really them. You're not seeing an act. You're not seeing something that I coached them to do. It's just them. And so that's what I'm looking for is those spaces where I can really capture authenticity, because there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the film does a great job of doing that. And then, for you guys, starting with Valerie again, I mean, when, you sign on, you're like, okay, I'm ready to tell this story, and then having to talk to the family, talk to everybody, make sure they're all comfortable with it as well. With those difficult conversations, were you having conversations that maybe you hadn't had before?
Well, when you say family, that would be my husband, and he trusts me. I say, hey, this is what's happening, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? Whatever you think. Okay, I'm on board as well. So
he was a little skeptical of me at first.
Oh yeah,
Let us say.
But we talked about it, and he didn't think that he was going to be mic'd. Actually, I released things to him gradually, kind of know when to speak to him, and then he did get comfortable with Brittany, and then inviting her over. Actually, I believe she came over first without micing him and just meeting, and then it was a natural progression.
Yeah, that's amazing. How about you, Roberta?
Well, to be a little bit transparent, they were all on board as far as filming, but the conversation as to the way the documentary starts to progress, I didn't have that conversation with my family, my children, my mother or my father until later into the filming process. So it actually helped me. It really inspired me and helped me to have that conversation with them, which was way past due. So.
Absolutely. And Laly?
And actually, I didn't have that conversation with my family until long after the filming had already finished.
Smart, yeah.
There was a lot less of my family involved in the filmmaking. There was more of me asking for permission with the agencies that I was working for at the time, county officials, the VFW National Legislative and DC elected officials at the national level. So it was more asking them for permission to be part of something much greater than what we're doing. So my husband was on board to support me. My family was very supportive of this process.
Yeah, and to speak on that, I think, it's great. You're inside these meetings. You're seeing what you're doing as far as the legislation is concerned. Was everyone on board? I mean, were they excited to get the word out about the process and how it could be changed, or was that a difficult conversation for you to have?
There was definitely some individuals that were very on board. They were very supportive, and they made it known. They were very supportive with Brittany, allowing her to come into the courtroom, allowing her to come up to DC. Yeah. I was very excited that they were welcoming and warm towards the idea of working together to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brittany, when you say that you're doing a film about this, beyond the subjects, were there any other thoughts in your head about who else I should get, who else I should, or did you want it to be solely, a look into these people's lives and how they're dealing with these issues? Did you ever have the idea of going bigger, going into knocking on doors in DC and sort of trying to, as far as the rights VA bill and all that thing?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of films I'm interested in making are story films that are about real people on the sort of micro level as opposed to the macro level of sitting with a legislator and doing an on-camera interview. I think there's a time and a place for that sort of thing. That's just not the kind of films that I make. And so what I hope that a film like this does is to really touch people's hearts and help them to connect with these women and by extension with other women veterans and start to really care about these issues and then go out and engage on a larger level in the way that they're able. I mean, so there are people who can use this film to help change legislation. There are people who can use this film to help set up Grace After Fire support groups around the country. There are people who could use this film to, show men in the military what it's like to be a woman in the military, in case you didn't notice. So there's a lot of different things that can happen with this film, but I see my job as to tell a good story first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Valerie, I think it's a great thing because sometimes, a veteran will come and they'll look for comfort, they'll look for guidance from somebody who maybe hasn't served before. And this shows you sort of opening up with fellow veterans and giving, this organization is powerful in that way. It's a safe place for these people to speak. I mean, so now that you're doing these screenings, now that you're getting this movie out here, now that people knew that you were making this movie, I'm sure it's opened the doors that maybe people hadn't considered having these kind of conversations like they had before.
Yeah, I love how you keyed in on a safe place. And with Grace After Fire, when we would have our Color Me Camo talks, which is curriculum-based, it was safe. The ladies are allowed to be vulnerable. We're allowed to share. And that's what I encourage as far as at a micro level, peer support, and then having those conversations with, what's shared, it will stay. And just lift each other up and support each other.
Yeah. And Roberta, I mean, I'm sure there's no equation for when someone wants to talk about the trauma that they've suffered while in service. I'm sure you've had the gamut rise. I mean, what do you think is the key in for people to be able to access that? Is it a circumstance in life? I mean, how do you get people to really open up to you?
Well, as Val stated, it is curriculum-based, the Table Talk Color Me Camo that we facilitate within Grace After Fire. We are not serving as licensed professionals, so there's a fine line with actually opening up too much because you don't want to leave anybody in a hole. However, we have licensed therapists that are on speed dial to where we will be able to refer them to mental health professionals or just licensed professionals so that they can start processing what has occurred, what they're experiencing, or what they're trying to overcome.
Nice. And Laly, I mean, there's some really fun scenes with you with the veterans, the veteran circle, VFW, and everything like that. I mean, cracking it up with the older vets and people who have been through other wars and other battles. I mean, are you guys all able to communicate the same way, or how's it to sort of negotiate the conversation between people who had gone through different wars and gone through different services?
As I mentioned in the film, that I found a warm, welcoming home at the VFW when my husband was deployed in 2009. I was standing at a memorial service for Memorial Day, and this young gal came up to me and said, why don't you come over? It's the VFW, and the first thing that came to my mind was, this place is full of a bunch of people that are really old. And that's true. But they were very warm, they were very welcoming, despite the fact that we served different wars, different generations, different jobs. It's that common knowledge of service, of wanting to serve a purpose much grander than yourself, starting those conversations across the board, the common suffering, just the common knowledge of what we had gone through. It just, around the table, we have breakfast every Friday morning. As a matter of fact, they're probably having breakfast right at this moment right now at the VFW. But they were very warm and welcoming, males, females, across the board. So I've had nothing but a positive experience with them.
And, maybe any of you can speak on this, Brittany. I mean, from what you've observed so far, now acclimating back, and I mean, where do the inadequacies lie with our VA rights right now, with the programs? Obviously, it's a little out of date, some of the ways that, veterans are being treated right now. Maybe you could speak about this, but, where can we change first and foremost in government,
I think I'll let you guys answer this question.
Definitely in access and accountability of the VA healthcare system. Right now, veterans can wait anywhere between 30 to 90 days to access an appointment, and if they fall outside of that window of 30 days, they're supposed to have something called the Choice Care Act that is supposed to be able to help them find a provider outside of the VA. If they live within a certain radius outside of the VA, if their appointment is outside of 30 days. Not only access and accountability to the VA, but standardization across the board. You may have a great director in San Antonio and not so great in Austin or vice versa. And these are not individuals that I know or anything like that. These are just theoretical. But there is no standard across the board. And right now, we're working with our legislation to try to change that. In Washington, D.C., the VFW is actively lobbying to try to hold these individuals, these directors, accountable for their actions at their VA hospital. For example, I myself went to an appointment called a VA compensation and pension examination just back in May, after 2 years of waiting. I show up for my appointment, and I have a neurology appointment, and when I walk in, they send me to an OBGYN specialist for a neurology appointment. So things like this, like removing this nonsense that the veterans have to deal with, to add insult to injury. You know, I have a great sense of humor. Took it as a grain of salt, and I said, I know what I need to do. I need to write my elected officials. I need to start writing and drafting my letter. I need to go to patient's advocate. I know what I need to do. But what happens to a veteran who's not well, who that was their only opportunity to help them, who that was their saving grace, and now they've been mistreated, they felt undervalued, underappreciated, disrespected. Not only did they send me to the wrong individual to go see someone, they just completely negated that, and then sent me on my merry way.
There's been a lot of reform at the VA in the last 5 years, but the problem is, as Laly is saying, it's a giant system. It has different people running every single of the hundreds of local outposts of the VA, and that reform has been applied very inconsistently. And it is, you know, I think that there is an idea that there's these bureaucrats on one side of this red tape, and then there's all this. They're not thinking about that there's human beings on the other side of the paperwork who often are traumatized, often have PTSD, depression, anxiety, all these other things that, you know, are obvious side effects of their service, that make it even harder for them to have the motivation or the wherewithal to cut through that red tape. So we need to be able to provide a better way in for the people who need that service.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you guys are set to premiere at Doc NYC here in New York City Friday tonight, and then Monday, I guess, at IFC Center.
Mm-hmm.
What's the plan? Are you guys going to screen this at? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of interest in the veteran community to see films like this to help us start the conversation, like you were talking about. Are there plans to do more of that?
Well, this is just the beginning, and this is our premiere. We will be doing additional festival screenings. We'll be doing a social impact campaign that will put the film in front of audiences around the country. We're seeking distribution, so we still will have that as well. We'll have broadcast and or theatrical coming up sometime within the next year. But we're really hoping to get this in front of military communities, military bases. We'll have a website, we'll have curriculum modules, we'll have all this stuff to get this message out to the audiences who need it. Primarily female veterans and their families, but also the general public.
Yeah. How about Grace After Fire? Are you hosting a screening? Are you planning on showing it out?
Yes, after the premieres and taking it to different cities and towns, we will start doing that as well with Brittany.
Amazing. Well, congratulations, guys. I think we have some questions out there in the audience.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I want to thank you all for the work and service you've done for this country. It means a lot to me and everybody in the crowd today. I want to get back to the topic of families. Have your families been able to see a cut of After Fire yet? And if so, what has their reaction been?
Actually, my two older children and my mother and father, they were at a private screening, and it was very emotional. And very impactful. I mean, I can tell you, as my father sat next to me, he just squeezed my hand, and yeah, so they're very supportive.
That's great. Same with you guys?
And my husband has not seen the documentary. He will be seeing it tonight with me today. My son has seen it, but my husband has not.
My husband has, but none of my family knows that I'm involved in this project, so it'll be a surprise.
More to come.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, next question.
Hello, ladies. I just wanted to know, I was curious actually to know, what were some of the misconceptions about women in the military, and did you experience those misconceptions? And for Brittany, I wanted to know, when you were first starting the documentary, did your vision for the documentary come to fruition, or did it just change because of the circumstance?
Why don't you guys go first?
Start with you guys. Laly, yeah.
So I don't think I really, I think that a lot of people may think that women in the military are not able to be as resilient as they were. I am a combat veteran. I did serve in 2003. I went that whole year, I was deployed for a year and a half, actually. I went that whole year, and I was 1 out of 10 women in my company, out of a company of 105, 95 males. There was times where I had to suck it up, and I had to move on. And people look back now and they see my pictures and they say, is that you? You know, is that you in that uniform? Is that you on top of that vehicle with that gun? And I say, yeah, that's me, you know. But I thought women weren't allowed to do those things. I thought women that weren't allowed to go to combat. I thought women weren't allowed to serve in the front lines. And I served early on in the war in 2003, and I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I run across in the veteran community. And the second one is misconceptions in the veteran community itself. A lot of women veterans do not identify as veterans. They have served in the military, and they themselves don't see themselves as a veteran either because they didn't retire or because they didn't serve in Iraq or Afghanistan, or they didn't serve in another conflict. Women veterans are having a hard time identifying as women veterans.
Roberta?
Well, I would just, and I ditto, but to add that there have been already and continue to be many barriers that are being broken. And so for women, whether they be active duty, reserve, or now transitioned out of the military, they were leaders and they have so much to contribute to, whether it be in the military or after service. So just breaking the barriers and leading from the front, women can do it just as well.
Yeah, that's correct. As far as assumptions, I just felt like when they said, no, you can't, I said, yes, I will, and I'll show you. So I learned that with a lot of the women when we speak, when they said there was a barrier, this was a challenge, and then you see that women will navigate and do what they have to do if that's a goal and if that's what they choose to do. It may take a little longer, but you know, we can make it happen. So.
Well, to answer the second part of your question, I went into this project with a fairly open mind about what I would get, because what I was looking for was stories that were unfolding in real time that I could follow over a course of 6 to 8 months, and something would happen, but I didn't know what was going to happen. With all of these women, I thought they were interesting. I thought they were strong. They're all accomplished. They're all amazing. And to me, that was I was looking to have that as kind of the front, but then, you know, underneath that, we all have our struggles and our challenges and our invisible wounds. And so to me, to be able to show that these strong, amazing women are also struggling, and to see how they kind of get through those struggles, that's what I was looking for. And so I think that is what I captured, but I didn't know how that was going to play out. So you know, the shape that the film took at the end was, I couldn't have predicted that at all at the beginning.
Nice. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, as a documentary filmmaker who is trying to tell these human stories and is, you know, just trying to follow them and show them as they unfold, how do you go about actually crafting that story after you have that footage, after you've talked to these people, and how do you create a narrative out of that?
Yeah, so I'm looking for all the same things that fiction filmmakers are looking for. You know, I'm looking at, from the very beginning of the project. I mean, they may not have realized I was doing this when I was asking them questions, but I'm trying to find out, what do you want? What are the obstacles in the way of getting what you want? Who are your confidants in your life? And I'm starting to kind of map out what this story might be, so that I have, you know, an obstacle. I have an objective, I have obstacles, I have turning points along the way, I have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So then, you know, once I'm finished filming, I go back and I sort of look over what I have, and I start pointing out those kinds of things. Yes, there's a turning point, there's some conflict, there's an obstacle, and then I start to just sort of construct the footage I have according to that kind of structure. And that's not something that, you know, a lot of people don't want to admit that they have conflict in their lives or that they have obstacles. And so that's always a challenge, trying to get them to understand, like all of you, to understand that this is a story. Like, it's not a story unless there's obstacles, and actually viewers relate to people who aren't perfect and who face the same challenges that we all face. Perfect people in a movie aren't any fun to watch, and you don't care about them as much as you care about people who look like you and act like you. So that's sort of what I'm looking for when I'm constructing a story.
Nice. Well, one more hand for this amazing crew from After Fire, guys. Check it out at IFC Center if you're in New York City, and then otherwise just check it for Facebook and Twitter. Congratulations, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.